Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me a gentleman whose work I came across while I was doing some research kind of globally, and I got really excited about it because when I was looking at it, I was like, well, you know what? I feel like we could use a lot of what he's designing over here in Toronto, in Canada. Based out of Melbourne in Australia, we have connected a number of times now leading up to this interview, and I've been looking forward to doing this for quite some time now. So today I have with me, and I am excited about this, I have Robert Davidov of Davidov Architects. Robert, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you for that very lovely introduction. We have spoken a few times now, and with some scheduling issues, but I'm really glad that we're here together now.
Yeah, so just it's worth saying. So stating timing. For me right now, it's 8:30 at night, and for you, it is what,
10:30 in the morning the next day.
Yes. So Robert's living in the future. So Robert, we've spoken, come to know each other in some capacity, and what I have never asked you intentionally is a bunch of stuff that I'll ask you now because I like for it to be fresh. So if you don't mind, can you give us some background detail into like what your life was like as a kid and what has led you down this path at an early stage of life into becoming an architect?
Yeah.
And you can take it back as far as you want, earliest memories, 3, 4 years old, 6 years old.
It's not that complicated for me. I grew up and my dad was in construction. He was a builder. So it was something we were very exposed to. So we would, on school holidays, I'd be with him, visiting the sites, getting muddy, seeing how things came together. And it wasn't that was necessarily something that really interested me, but I had that exposure.
Okay.
But at the same time, I loved to draw and had all of that kind of visual creativity. Whether it was Lego or illustration or all of those things. And I thought about a career in graphic design or something like that. And I guess that evolved into an interest in what I thought was architecture, but simply just because that was the design side of construction.
I asked you a question on this.
Yeah.
Your dad, what was he building? Was he building in like single family residential?
Not anything large scale. So it was either single residential or small unit developments, that kind of scale. One to maybe 3 stories, but generally 1 or 2 stories, and from one house to like 7 townhouses.
Before we continue, I just want to tell you about a really key supplier we work with. And I don't want you to skip over this because it's important. They're synonymous with exceptional kitchens and seamless integration. Early in the conversation, you'll hear Robert talk about growing up around construction, about how precision and restraint shape the spaces we live in. Later on, he'll describe his design philosophy, creating environments where technology and function disappear into form, where what's there looks as though it's not there at all. The same idea applies beautifully to Kaplan's. When appliances are considered early, right alongside millwork and layout, the result is a kitchen where everything fits effortlessly. Integrated refrigeration, pocketed ovens, custom panel finishes let the architecture lead while performance remains uncompromised. Whether you're working with an architect, designer, or builder, bring Kaplan's into the conversation early. Their team helps ensure every specification and clearance aligns perfectly with your vision, long before installation day. It's where design and performance live in harmony. If you want to find out more about Kaplan's, email me. It's Jonathan, JONATHAN, at waldenhomes.ca. Now, let's get back to Rob.
And was he doing this on spec or was he doing it for clients?
A bit of both.
Okay.
A bit of both. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
so the houses that I would generally visit were the ones that he was doing on spec.
Okay.
Which would be the unit sites.
Got it.
Primarily, yeah.
Okay. And where was this? Was this also in Melbourne or was this somewhere else?
Yeah, this was all in Melbourne, all in the inner ring suburbs of Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that later on.
Yeah. So, and part of that was also because it was a family business, mum and dad kind of running that. a lot of the business then comes home and is discussed at the kitchen table. So that's more exposure. It wasn't an office, it was at home.
Okay.
And then there's, it's not just building, it's also being the developer, speculating, going to the inspections, checking out the market, and then all of the risks that come with that. So we were exposed to all of that growing up. And I guess that also gives you a lot of respect for money and respect for developing and the risks involved.
Right.
And the fact that a house is someone's home, but it's also in many ways their largest asset and investment. So when people come and say they want to do their forever home, their dream home, at the back of my mind is always, that's all well and good and you're the client, but I still want there to be some level of responsibility, to be very boring about it, to go, well, this still needs to be something that will pay its way and will look after you in the long term too.
Right.
Which is not very, it's the opposite of romantic. It's the opposite of what an architect might be, the architect, quote unquote, might be thinking about, but it really is also what the architect, the lowercase architect maybe should be thinking about, because these are resources and there's a responsibility in how they are used and longevity and how they will be handed down to the next user.
Right. So were they talking with your mom was doing the bookkeeping and doing financials?
Yeah.
So you're sitting around the table. What's your earliest recollection of like hearing, because when you're young, you don't even really understand what money is. So when they're talking about something costing thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, were they ever putting it into terms that you understood as a kid?
No, I don't. You're talking and I'm thinking, was there any? No, it's all just washing over you.
Okay.
No, they weren't involving my sister and I in the conversation and saying that's like a car or that's like
that's like 10,000
that's like 10 sofas or something like that. It's like, no, they weren't. We weren't in, but we were just at the table. We weren't in the conversation.
Fair enough. I don't know, just rationalizing the numbers. So how did you come to the concept that like you could turn some form of mathematics and art into a career that would relate to what they were doing? Like, were they bringing home blueprints and were you looking at that, and did that strike something with you? Like, what did that look like for you?
Oh yeah, I was very familiar with the plans, sometimes architectural, but a lot of the times they'd be bringing back the page you'd get from an open for inspection, where they had that very crude plan that the estate agency might put together. And because they would be then getting out the biro and going, well, we could extend here or there or open that up if they were looking at doing a renovation. So we were very familiar, I became very familiar or comfortable with looking at a floor plan, being able to read that, and then thinking about it, something that can be manipulated.
Right.
Like it's not set in stone. It's like, oh, well, where does a plan want to grow or change or be opened up or manipulated in whatever way? That was something that I was definitely exposed to. And then and then of course on the other developments, there were architectural drawings, and not that anyone was looking for my opinion, they certainly weren't, but you'd see them and you could look over them and get a familiarity. So it wasn't like when I walked into university, I'd never been on a construction site or seen a set of documents.
Right. Yeah. Well, it wasn't new to you, of course. Yeah, that makes sense. But did you were you ever looking at like doing the space planning for your own bedroom and like doing layouts of like where your bed would go or anything like that, or no?
I didn't, and that's probably also because my mum really she kept a pretty tight ship, and it wasn't like we were like, look, we were moving around a lot too, and a lot of the properties we were in were also rentals, so it wasn't like we could personalize the room so much either. But it's not like either of my sister and I ever really even asked, could we paint a wall or do this or that? That just wasn't that kind of environment.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Okay.
If you wanted to explore something, you could do it on paper.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, there's less risk in that.
Yeah. No, it wasn't that kind of, like if we wanted to put a few posters up of a band or whatever, sure, get the blue tack. But it wasn't let's move furniture around and let's get the paint tins open. No, that wasn't.
Well, who was the band? Who was the poster of the band that would go up?
God, it was the 90s in Australia, so it was Silverchair and maybe some Nirvana. It was the night, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I'm asking.
it was the typical.
Silverchair. Haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, then they're not coming back. And I'm still a big fan of Jamiroquai. I was listening to a lot of Jamiroquai in the 90s too.
I listen to Jamiroquai all the time. All the time. Great, great, great. You know, I think it was like 30 years ago that his first album came out.
Probably around then, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we move past Jamiroquai and posters and Silverchair and some rentals, and you get into high school. And in high school, were you starting to zone in on the fact that this was a potential career you wanted to go at, and were you taking any courses that would fulfill that need?
So there weren't any courses that were offered in my school that were going to be anything into visual comm or graphics. The only art course that the school offered which would be like fine art,
Right.
which was art history and art. It was a 50-50 split in the course.
Yeah.
And I did that as an elective all the way through. But when I was doing my final year, because art isn't given a good ranking in the scoring for your matriculation, I ditched it in lieu of the university mathematics course, which would be a very well received course. But after 3 days, I made the switch back and said, I got enough maths and chemistry and physics on my books. I'll do one subject. But with art, like architecture, there isn't a solution. So when you're doing the folio or whatever it is,
Yeah.
whether it's more time you could spend on a canvas or doing another canvas, there's no end to it.
Right.
So it's a subject that is not going to reward you in terms of helping your score to get into university.
Right.
And it's going to, at the same time, absorb the most time, but you love it.
Yeah. I took
Yeah.
I took art all the way through high school. It took some.
So you know what I mean.
I did.
And I think that's something that's pretty much a metaphor for architecture as a profession too.
Right.
You could be doing a lot of other things to get the score, and this is not going to be the most efficient way to do it, and it will take up the most amount of time because there's no end. If you're doing someone's books, once you've done them. You can check them and maybe double check them, but they're done. There's an answer, or law, or medicine. There is an answer. There is you've done your job. But architecture, you could do a lighting plan, and then you could go, yeah, I've done it, but I could do it another 5 different ways. Which is the best? You can debate. I don't know how much you can debate the best way or the right way to do everything in other professions.
Yeah.
But it's different. It's not, there's scientific elements to architecture, but it's not a science.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
Right. And I guess you come to that now, but then at the time you had the excitement of it. So you took what you needed to be able to get to where you would have the grades to get into university. And did you apply for architecture school off the bat, or did you did?
In Australia, you can.
Okay.
So I think you've got 8 courses you can apply for, and then depending on your study score, you will get an offer.
Okay.
And what I'd elected to do, well, we missed one part of my backstory with architecture.
Okay.
And that was because my parents were exposed to the construction industry and had been impacted by a big recession that Australia had in the late 80s. They recalled seeing architects that they'd worked with or known driving taxis during that recession. So they really didn't want me to be exposed to that if history were to repeat. So they said, if you want to be in the construction industry or you're creative, be an engineer. They'll have work. That will be the only thing my parents wanted for me, was to find a career that was recession proof.
Yeah, stability.
Yeah. And I really didn't have an interest in engineering. But when I was at an open day at Melbourne University, they had a double degree on offer, which was architecture and construction management. So I decided to do that double degree. Yeah. So that was my first choice, and I was lucky to get that.
And
that choice.
was it a 4-year or 5-year? How long was?
So what that means is for the first, I went in on with an architecture master's, I guess you'd kind of say. So for the first 3 years, I was just doing the architecture course.
Okay.
Then you needed to take a year off and do work experience with a registered architect.
Yeah. So
like I did that. Pardon?
A co-op term.
Co-op term.
Yeah.
And so then you come back, and when everyone all of my colleagues went and did their 2-year, what's now called a master's in architecture, I came back and did a catch-up year in construction management, and then 2 more years where the load was split 50-50 between the construction management subjects, which were structures and construction, a lot of subjects on quantity surveying, project management, all of those types of courses. And the other half were the design studios.
So 7 years.
So it was 6 years at uni with that, and then that work experience year in the middle. So it was 7 years. It was a long run.
Yeah, it's like getting a law degree or becoming a doctor.
Yeah, but I look, even if it would have been straight, I think now it's just 5 years.
Okay.
And that work year doesn't exist anymore. So, but that would still take 5 years, which is still a long run.
Yeah, but
you're not a registered architect.
Right.
Listening to Robert describe the structure of his studies, balancing architecture and construction management, reminds me that great design is always an act of balance between light and structure, control and creativity. That balance is something we think about often when we work with the doors, our partner in delivering window and door systems that perform with architectural precision. From vinyl and fiberglass to wood, aluminum clad, or full curtain wall assemblies, their work bridges design intent and technical execution. Later in this conversation, Robert talks about proportion and light, how the surface, the framing, the material all control what we perceive. That's what makes the doors so effective. Their in-house aluminum fabrication eliminates the uncertainty of long lead times, giving complete control from selection through installation. And with their new spider crane, capable of lifting 5 tons, more than 75 feet in the air, even the most challenging sites become possible. The doors, engineering light, proportion, and performance into every project. And if you want to learn more about them, email me at Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca, and I'm happy to connect you with their team. Now, let's get back to Rob.
And the other difference is not only if you're saying that you're not a registered architect, but you don't have the work experience. If you
don't, no. But I think that became more problematic because, and I don't know how it is in Canada or in the States, but a lot of the universities here are geared towards a significant proportion of the students are from another country.
Okay.
So for them to come on a study visa is one thing, but then if it has to be a work visa, it becomes problematic. And very disruptive if they're coming and going.
Right.
So they were kind of running it on 2 streams, but that is a little bit discriminatory. So I think it just had to be abandoned.
Okay.
I'm not really across all the politics of it, but that's the reality.
Right.
We had it, and it was and some people decided after that 1 year of work experience that they'd seen an office and they said, this is not for me, or this is for me, but I know I want to be small practice or large practice or whatever it is. So it's a very useful time. 1 year is a huge investment to make that observation. It can be done in different ways, but it's still a very useful program. And now we've had, from probably more years than not, except for the COVID years, we've had students working in our team 1 or 2 days a week. So we've had a series of students that have been with us, and they've just reached out because it's not a formal program, but they wanted to get industry experience while they study.
Smart kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, like when you were going through the courses, Actually, even before that, when you applied, did you know anyone else applying, or were you doing this on your own?
I didn't really know. There was someone that I knew from a youth movement who from another school
Yeah.
who I don't know if I saw him at an open day, but I saw him on the first day of uni. And I had another friend that I knew was applying to do the construction management course.
Okay.
But it's a big, I think it's the biggest university in Melbourne. So I knew a lot of other people going to the university, but not necessarily a lot of people doing architecture.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, in what would have been in some capacity an undergrad program, but you said you got a master's, so it wasn't.
No, it's a master's now. When we finished, I ended up just getting 3 different bachelor's degrees.
Oh, okay. So it was an undergrad degree, because what I was going to go with was like, really, it's like engineers and potentially the stream of what you're talking about in architecture and construction management that are probably the most grueling undergrads,
Yeah.
graduate degrees, meaning like you might know other people there, but you might not get to see them a whole lot.
No, and you really only get to know the people that are in your in your studios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you end up doing with your co-op? Did you go into commercial practice or public practice, or did you go to res practice? What did that look like? Or were there multiple practices?
No, I was only in one practice and I stayed there. I pretty much did 48 weeks there.
Okay.
I just kept going through because you can't, after your 26 weeks is up, you can't go back to uni because you're out of sync.
Yeah.
So most people just do a full year. I worked for Harmer Architecture,
Okay.
and they were a firm. Look, I liked some of the designs that they were doing, and it was a small team. They were in a new office that they just designed the building, and they were working on education, small scale resi, and not that I worked on any of the projects, but they were doing a lot of mausoleums, but not mausoleums in kind of the traditional classical style. They were doing them in a very contemporary way. And had carved a real niche for themselves, because there's quite a lot of consideration with the mausoleums, with the drainage and the venting and all of with the prefabricated concrete crypts, how that's all constructed and shuttered. So they had that down. And
what an interesting, like, I should say morbid, but like, what an interesting niche to carve out. I wouldn't even think of architecture in a mausoleum, but it makes complete sense.
In a way, like, because there's so much pressure on cemetery land, even in places like Australia. So I'm sure it's just worldwide.
Yeah.
Especially in places with a far more a dense urban makeup. Mausoleums are just becoming more and more important. And people, like you see, if you go to any cemetery, a lot of the headstones are becoming more contemporary. So people would want that to resonate with if part of their tradition or part of just the economics of the cemetery they're in is moving towards mausoleums.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these were built for predominantly the Italian Catholic community, and that's generally part of their tradition anyway, regardless of land, like whether they could economically have a plot. It's part of their tradition to have a crypt, and whether that was a family crypt or the public crypt. And these were things that the cemetery trustees would test the market with, and then come to the architect and say, let's make this work. We need, let's do 12 private family crypts, and then they can be sold off, or we need to do 1,000, and they might be done in stages. But so they worked on several cemeteries when I was there, and they just kept expanding. And because there's a bit of money involved, they can be really beautiful buildings with beautiful materials that also have to last a long time with minimal maintenance. So it's a really interesting type of architecture to be involved with.
Right. Well, and it has high impact, right? Like you're talking like for generations of people that want to go and see late relatives.
Mm.
So, okay. So you finish there. What did you feel were some of the main takeaways you had, if you can remember them, from that experience that led you in a direction when you finished school? Did you associate with like some of the res more than some of the other work like you're referring to now, or what did that look like for you?
I think I always was more drawn to the small scale and to the res.
Okay.
In the next job I got when I graduated, I was a little bit more exposed to larger projects, some civic work, education work,
Okay.
which was all good. It was all good work with good clients, but you're probably further away from the end user as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I do like those relationships and those conversations that you get only with private residential work and that level of detail. But I don't know if that really started from that exposure at Harmer. It was probably much earlier with the exposure I had from my family.
Yeah. And maybe
but I was working
reinforced.
It was reinforced, but I did work on resi work at Harmer and other, random things. But a lot of it as the student, you were doing markups and checking things off. It was a lot of markups, and that's really boring and a little bit scary. It was all CAD, so it's just lines. You could delete a whole bunch of lines and then they're gone. And a lot of it, you just start and it's like, just change it. And you're just blindly hoping that you're understanding the instruction correctly. But you start and you just kind of, they put you at the deep end or wherever they're putting you, and you just kind of hope that you're doing it right. Slowly.
You hope the swimming lessons paid off.
Yeah. But it's grueling, but it probably does emphasize for the students getting in and getting your feet wet.
Yeah.
As soon as you can helps, because the work and the profession of architecture is very different to the study of architecture. You don't learn those skills in university. You're only going to learn them at your first job.
Right.
Or at in the industry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, what did that first paying job look like? You finished school. How did you go about applying? Were you looking up different practices that you wanted to look at, you wanted to go work at, or did you simply just kind of blanket the resume to a whole bunch of different firms? What did it look like?
No, I didn't have any of that opportunity, because when I finally finished studying after 7 years, I said, I'm taking a gap year.
Okay.
And I did my grand tour.
What
and
was
that ended up, so that was me going from here, and I traveled around the USA for 5 weeks.
Okay.
And then flew to Helsinki, and then from there worked my way around Europe for the next 6 months.
Okay.
And then ended up in Venice, volunteering at the Australian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2008. And the plan from there was to go to London, where I'd applied for a UK working visa as an Australian, and I'd made contact with a few London-based architectural firms. But by September 2008, the global financial crisis had hit.
Yes.
And I was too late. So all of those leads told me that I couldn't even come in for an interview because I just laid off 20 architects.
Right.
Or whatever it was.
Right.
So I ended up continuing my travels, and I came back to Australia in, I think, late November that year.
Of 2008.
Of 2008. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because the industry here had also been hit by the same financial crisis. So when I'd finished my studies, I'd received an award that was sponsored by a company. So because I did the construction and architecture double degree, there was a firm in Melbourne that did architecture and construction management, and they sponsored an award for a student who did the double degree, who had the highest aggregate grades. So I was the recipient of the award, but I was overseas on my gap year.
Congratulations.
My parents, thank you. My parents received the award on my behalf, and the directors said to them that I should get in contact when I got back. And that's what I did. And they had, because I had an experience with a lot of government work, by that stage, 3 months later, some of the stimulus programs had begun, and they had just been awarded a contract to do some social housing. So they after the call, they said, you can come in on January 5th and I worked with them for 3 years and they helped. All the work I did with them was enough to get me to get my registration done.
Right.
And that was a good 3 years.
Okay. And you were working on projects with teams at this point.
Small teams. It was a much larger firm than Harmer, and because they had been quite successful to lock in quite a lot of this new government work, the team grew from something like 35 to over 60 in the next year.
Wow.
But then it started to shrink again as that work then dried up. But I was primarily working on these small social housing projects. Some of them were small units in the suburbs. One of them was the conversion of 2 mansion houses in a city, Melbourne, into 9 self-contained apartments for women's housing. It was explicitly for women.
Yep.
And that was a great project because the women that were being initially housed were those that were already in this property that really wasn't serving their needs well. So we got to meet with them, and then towards the end of the project, we saw a few of them as they moved back in, and it was a great improvement to their quality of life too.
I would imagine that there were some hugs that were shared in that in that time that really helped formulate the kind of the direction of the power of what you do.
Look, it's also really sensitive though, because these were women who have been through a lot. And when we were coming through initially, you can imagine the anxiety and the apprehension of, people coming through their homes is like really we might say we're here to help them and we're just doing our project and you're going to get a new home. But maybe we weren't. Maybe they were going to be taken to a new home and not allowed to return. So as much as we could tell them that, what we thought was true. Yeah. And that's what ended up happening. They got to come back, and that was pretty incredible. And look, I also got to work on a small project associated with the University of Melbourne, my alma mater, and that was a project that I got more of a leading role, and that really helped with my registration experience.
Right.
But that was pretty much it, because as I said, the firm started to shrink again, and I found myself without that much to do. And I was really looking at doing with one of the directors a lot of feasibility studies that were really unsolicited, just trying to create a job, which is fun in short bursts, but it can become kind of draining because you want to feel like you're working on something real. Mm-hmm. But just doing these very high level studies, doesn't sustain you.
Yeah, you felt like you're underserving your needs. Yeah.
You're not even like, are you even paying your way? Like, are they just trying to keep you occupied?
Yes, right.
Because that's not keeping the lights on.
Right. So I have 2 questions, because in advance of this, you had talked about how you had traveled in that gap year. So were there elements of those travels that you feel really stuck with you and have attributed in some capacity to the design style that you have now? And were there specific pieces of architecture that you got to experience that you've drawn upon now through some additional research that you've applied to some projects that you've gone into and created at this point?
Yeah, definitely. On that trip, look, I would have seen literally hundreds of buildings. Yeah. Like every day, like I was staying in hostels with other backpackers, and it's like, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, we're going to go to the beach, do some shopping, check out a restaurant. I had a list of 5 buildings that I wanted to hit.
Okay.
And sometimes you would be, taking, 3 modes of transport to get to a building. 3 hours there, you might be at the building for half an hour or so, and then back, and that's your day. But that's the pilgrimage. That's the job.
Yeah.
But visiting, like seeing some of the Mies and Frank Lloyd Wright projects in Chicago, like Unity Temple and the compression and the expansion, that stays with you when he really hits you with that. Like, I'm not a Frank Lloyd Wright fan per se, but if you're in Chicago, you're going to go to Oak Park and you're going to visit. But I really wanted to see Unity Temple, and that was incredible. And I loved Mies in university, so to see, I haven't been to Farnsworth House, but I saw some of his projects, although it was inspired by him in Chicago, but I also got to visit the Barcelona Pavilion.
Yeah.
And just the detailing there is something that really, and even the materials, but the execution of that vision is remarkable.
Listening to Robert describe spaces that feel carved from the earth, where proportion, material, and light come together, makes me think about the same philosophy applied outdoors. That's what Aquanta Pools does so beautifully. Their pools are built using biodesign technology from Italy, sculpted, not poured, but they can be, with forms that follow the natural grade of the land. Instead of looking like an addition, they feel like they've always been part of the site. Each one is custom contoured to the terrain with seamless integration into surrounding stone, planting, and slope. The result is something that doesn't just sit in the landscape. It belongs to it. Soft, natural, and enduring. It's the same principle that runs through the best architecture. When design and nature move in the same direction, the line between what's built and what's found disappears. Aquanta Pools is designed in harmony with the land and inspired by Italy's biodesign tradition. If you want to learn more, email me, Jonathan, Jonathan, at waldenhomes.ca, and I'm happy to connect you with their team. Now, let's get back to Rob.
But two other things that really stay with me are 2 nights I got to spend at La Tourette, the Corbs Monastery in France. And I stayed there and had an incredible time, just because I don't know if it's still the same today, but when you would stay there, they would provide all of your meals and you had free run through the monastery. So during the day, you would go into the ambulatory and into the chapel and into the sacristy and see all of the different spaces, but through different times of the day as well, and really see how Corbs was controlling the light. And just being immersed in all of that concrete and the acoustics of it all, and walking around the building. Being there for a couple of days really gives you time to appreciate a piece of architecture that big. And a few days before I was there, I visited Ronchamp, and that probably wasn't my first taste of Corbs, because I think they may have been the first 2 Corbs buildings I'd been to. But then I was able to visit the Ville Savoy outside Paris, like a week later. But Corbs was but until then, I guess until you visit a building, you only know an architecture through photos or video. Back then, it wasn't that much video. Now you could just go on YouTube and someone's walking their iPhone through a building. But back then, it was just a couple of shots that we'd all seen, probably in black and white.
Right.
So this was incredible. And the other one was the same tutor at uni who told me to see or to stay in La Tourette maybe knew more about me than I knew about myself at the time, or maybe it was just a fluke. But he also said, and go to Vals, the Petersum thermal bath house in Vals, Switzerland. So it was not in my budget, but I said, screw it. And I booked him for 1 night to stay at the hotel, and that was incredible. And it was also important to stay in the hotel because it meant you could go into the bathhouse before it was open to the public,
right?
And really appreciate it as a much more tranquil place than it becomes later in the day,
right?
And that was still under the original management. It's been sold since. So I'm not sure if it's been maintained in the same way, but it was again like things you can observe from the work of Mies in the Barcelona Pavilion, the precision, not just in the execution, but the precision of the proportions and the way things fit together at Vals is, it's something you aspire to and can be inspired by. But it was the first time I noticed a building that was that considered, that much perfect a product. Just the proportions of the stairwell, the stairs that take you down into the main pool, and the depth and the height of the perfect step then influences the the length of the staircase, which then becomes the depth of the pool. All of these proportions start feeding into it. So it's almost like the building is designed, the proportions of the building is designed by the going of a step. And to think I'm going to design a whole building around the going of a step is pretty incredible. But the building is always about going down into these pools. So it's something you're doing a lot.
Right.
But it's something to think about, like, because there is the large processional staircase that takes you down from the change areas, from a high level down into the main level of the bathhouse. It's always about these steps and this movement. And it's a very Corbusian way of thinking about things too, because he's always about displaying and really involving you with your movement through space. But I don't think even he was thinking about, because look, a lot of his buildings are whitewashed.
Yeah.
But Zumthig's, it's all of these stones, which are also stacked in a way where you really never see yes, there are different length stones, but the way they even turn corners, the whole thing is remarkable. Yeah. And so I haven't been to these buildings now for, I guess, 17 years, but it doesn't leave you.
Is it time for another pilgrimage?
Look, there was several years when I was working in that after graduating, and then when I was setting up the company where I didn't travel for a long time. But I think about 9 years ago, I started again. And pretty much every year from there, I've tried to take a good trip. Not every year, but there's been trips to explore in that time, Morocco and Mexico and Peru, and back to do a couple of Louis Kahn buildings. So I went to Fort Worth to see the Kimball, and San Diego or La Jolla to see the Salk Institute. And earlier this year, I went to Milan for the design week for the first time, which was amazing.
Yeah, I remember photos you were taking.
And also back, and I've been to Japan twice in the last 10 years too. So I've tried to keep up these smaller pilgrimages.
Yeah.
And also, I think 3 years ago, I went to back to Egypt.
Okay.
So some of the places that I went to, I've been back to in Berlin, but cities like New York and Paris and London, I haven't been to since that grand tour, which is now 17 years ago. So it's a couple of years ago now. So they're calling, but I normally take my big trip over our Christmas here. That's when we have our industry shutdown.
Yes, you don't want to go to New York in the middle of winter?
I don't really want to go to any of those cities in the middle of winter, because not just because it's freezing and there's no daylight, but a lot of things are shut.
Well, I mean, New York is pretty bopping during the holiday season, but
it's the after the holiday season that I worry about.
Yeah,
getting a bit quiet for a few days.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, we just covered a whole lot of things, but we have not even spoken about yet is your practice. So let's talk about that. So, in what year do you create and officially register Davidov Architects?
I think it was registered August 2011.
Okay. And what was the level of anxiety upon registration? High or low?
Not really. There was no anxiety. Look, I went. My bosses were good. They saw the situation as well.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to go part-time. And they said, that's fine. So we went part-time. I went part-time. And within, by October, November, a few other things came up. Yeah. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take the risk. And I'll go full-time, because it was already getting hard managing phone calls and different emails. So I thought I've got a few things on. If I can just get one more job before Christmas, I'll back myself. But it's only going to really work if I do that. So I really didn't go part-time for very long and had to just go all in. So within 3 months, I think I'd already said goodbye, and then said, let's see how this goes. And that was it. So but it was very slow. I was working from home for the first year and a half, 2 years. And then one of our first clients was looking for a showroom. And I said, where would you be looking? And he said all the areas that I would be happy to have a showroom. So I said, if you find a place that's 50 square meters too big, let me know. I'll take it. And like not long after that, he said, I've got a place and I want you to design it and you can take the front room. And we were there. That was for G-Lux, a stone and tile company. And we did their space and we were in the front room for 4 years. So that was really our first home. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to where we are now. I took the lease here in late 2017 and when we moved in early 2018.
So what did the progression of the practice look like from a staffing standpoint? You started out on your own, and
on my own.
How many projects did you need to be able to justify bringing in some support? And what was the first support? What did it look like? Was it someone in operations? Like, what did it look like?
I wasn't looking for any support. I was just finding my way, not very efficient, working a lot of hours on a lot of small jobs. Yeah. But it was okay. And then a student reached out from Monash and said, "Do you have any student placements?" And we'd received other, I'd received other CVs and things, but this one looked well put together. So I thought, okay, this person's got a bit of an aesthetic. They got a bit of a clue. So Preeti came in 1 or 2 days, I think probably 1 day a week, and maybe sometimes over the uni break, she might have done extra. So she was in and started to help me out. And I trained her up and she was really able to help with a lot of town planning applications. So it was good for her too. And she was with us for 3 years until she graduated and then moved to Sydney. But in that time, so probably after 4 years, a recruiter reached out who I didn't even know and said, "I think I've got someone for you." And I saw this portfolio and I said, "Oh, this looks really good." And I met Wayne. And he was really our first member of staff, and he was with us for 5 years. So it took a long time. So I was really working as a sole practitioner for 4 years. It's a long time to be working alone.
Yeah.
But it allowed me the opportunity to build up what I thought the practice might be about, to build up our aesthetic and our approach. It was definitely not set in stone, but we were on our way.
Right.
And I only had to compromise with the clients, not with the team.
Yeah, with the integrity.
And when you're still finding your way, at least it gave me that, I guess, that freedom to do it that way, or not look as, unprepared or unsure of what the next step was in front of someone else either. I was able to just sit down and work out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it.
Right.
So it went very, very quickly, those 4 years. But look, it was an indulgence that I took to really test and try, and that's where you might do a staircase 5 different ways until you work out which way is the way you want to do it and how. And I think that was important for me before bringing someone in, where they want to know which way it's going to be done. Otherwise, it would be because it could have been, it still was, but it would have been even more frustrating for someone coming in not knowing how we do something.
Right.
So at least that 4 years, because if I'd had more experience and I'd come to doing my own practice with a lot more understanding, it might have been a much more efficient process. But I was 29 when I started the practice, and I'd studied for 7 years. So I hadn't been in industry for very long. It was really just the 3 years I did post-graduation at FMSA that gave me any bearing. But I was a graduate architect there. I wasn't exposed to client agreements at all. I wasn't exposed to so many aspects of practice.
Right.
So those 4 years were really me working out how to do it and how I'm going to do it for a lot of things.
Crucial to your understanding of how to make the business run.
And I did look, if you're going into practice on day one with a partner, maybe you've got complementary skills, but you're also both probably, or it might be more of you, but you're all equals at that stage too. So but if I was going to bring anyone else in, they were going to be looking to me for answers.
Right.
So at least, I guess, after those first 4 years, I had more answers or more of a clue. So, but it was very slow. not anything I would. I don't know. I don't think it's the right way necessarily. It's just how I did it. It wasn't by design.
Yeah.
None of it was really by design. To go into practice at that age was more. That was the time to do it. So it was more. It was far more organic.
So as the practice evolved and you started to acquire more of the projects that you were looking to want to acquire, how did you establish? Because what in some way I feel like one of the motifs that you've got with you, and you can correct me on this if you feel I am incorrect, is you have a really nice contemporary and in some instances that modern style of complete minimalism in many ways, where like the wash on a wall is going to have the character of texture with the way the light's going to move across that wall. It's not just a standard drywall. You're going to have a plaster or you're going to have a micro cement is what I see in a lot of it. And so there's a lot of that feeling of you can get that warmth. Was that always something you wanted to create? And am I correct in saying this? Like, do you feel like that has become somewhat of the aesthetic, or am I off?
Oh, no. It's definitely something we push for when the budget allows, because it really just gives you a lot of depth. Because we don't, it is very pared back design.
Yeah.
So without it looking too, it's always about being clean but not clinical. So it's how do you add the texture? How do you add the warmth? How do you add the detail without adding the detail?
Yeah.
But the texture also for me gives it, it's not, you might read it as warmth, but I'm reading it as an organic earthiness, I talk about that more deliberately because I like the idea of our architecture being far more, even though it wants to be very crisp, there's a ruggedness to it. There is a primalness to it, almost like bridging those two things, because I want it to have this brutality, because I don't want it to look high tech.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to think about technology.
Yes.
When you're looking at these spaces. And when you see a wall which has that kind of cement or texture, it's kind of the opposite of a high finished surface.
Yes.
Because I don't want it to look like there's a computer in the room or a machine behind the wall. I want it to feel like you're in a stone cave.
Yeah, that was almost like the house was carved out of the ground.
Yeah. I'm much more comfortable with the idea of it just being you're in a cave than in a computer.
Well, and what's really interesting, so people don't necessarily know this listening to it, but we had recorded a challenge before for a newsletter that I create. You can actually see that walkthrough about this challenge on the YouTube channel for Behind the Build. And what I found interesting in this discussion now is that you've referenced stairs and how they are bringing you down into pools. And yet here you are in that project, and the stairs have now led you down from the individual areas of this home. And I now see the similarity to where you might have drawn upon some inspiration.
Oh, definitely, because we think about that in those proportions and how the stair ends and where does the wall meet the end of the stair. We talk about all of the time in those proportions,
right?
But not with the rigor of Zumthor.
I mean, look, I'm trying to liken it to that. Okay.
Thank you.
When you're working on complex builds, especially the kind where every millimeter in alignment matters, there's no room for improvisation. Every decision from the foundation up has to anticipate the next layer of design. That's where Henry Robert Steele becomes indispensable. Their work supports exactly the kind of precision you hear Robert describing. Modern architecture that depends on clarity, restraint, and flawless coordination. They deliver not just structural steel, but complete systems. Every fastener, every shim, every plate required for installation. And when a design calls for long open spans or hidden mechanical runs, their team fabricates beam penetrations and sleeves in-house, welding and aligning to exact specifications. That allows HVAC ducts, electrical conduits, or plumbing lines to pass cleanly without the need for bulkheads, preserving the architecture's intent. In projects where the details are invisible but everything depends on them, precision isn't optional, it's the point. Henry Rotberg steel is built for architecture that demands more than strengths. It demands accuracy. If you want to learn more, email me, Jonathan, Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca, and I'll tell you what it's like to work with them outside of this, and then I'll connect you with their team. But now, let's get back to the conclusion with Rob.
So as the practice has evolved, the types of projects that you take on now are what? It's single family residential. Have you done any multifamily? Have you done any low rise, multiplex? What has it looked like?
We're predominantly single resi, but there's still a lot of different types within that. So there's a building group of rural homes that we've designed on the Mornington Peninsula, which is an hour to an hour and a half away from Melbourne, where there's a lot of coastline and a lot of farmland or vineyard. So we designed houses along there, and it's beautiful country. And so that's one kind of typology of house, and they've predominantly been new. In Melbourne, there's been the new builds, which are also in a far more dense urban environment, but still suburban. And then there's the homes we've designed, which are an adaptation or an addition to a heritage building, whether it's an 1840s homestead or an 1860s wine merchant in inner Melbourne, or a conversion to a 1900 what was 14 bed sits to support nurses near a local hospital, which became a single level apartment in the 80s, which we converted into a new 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom apartment, 300 square meters, and put a new huge balcony into this 100-year-old 5-course brick thick wall. That was in a heritage building. So there's lots of different scales. Sometimes the project is much more interior, sometimes it's much more architecture. We've also worked with different interior designers on a lot of our resi projects too. And then there's a portion of the work which might be duplexes, or we're finishing now 8 family-sized townhouses not far from here. And we've done small apartment buildings, 3 stories, and that type of, and 2 stories, large luxury apartments and mid-range, but it's all residential. And we take the same kind of ideas through all of those projects.
Okay. That's a broad range of projects.
Even within, so it's still, if you say that 80% of the work is still single residential, that might sound like not a lot, but there's still a lot of different types when you think about it. So you can say, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into single resi, but there's still at least 3 core types of single resi we do: the rural, the urban, and then the heritage alts and additions. Yeah.
I was actually wondering something, and because you made a comment and now we're talking about this, you talked about the concept of trying to create a lot of like that earth tone and the feel within the homes that allow for it, right? And no computers. How do you integrate your appliances into that? Are you like, because that becomes an element that can either stand out or blend in?
Mm-hmm. On several projects now, we're even putting the ovens behind a pocket door. Okay. Integrated fridges also help. Yeah. With regard to thermostats, intercoms, switchboards, all of those things, we'll put them where we can behind a cabinet door or in a threshold, somewhere that it's not going to interfere with you and your mentality. Yeah. But we're putting them all behind doors. Like thermostats, we have an issue with because they need to read the temperature of the room.
Yeah, for sure.
But sometimes we'll even look at putting in a smaller dedicated thermostat temperature reader to just feed into the thermostat, where you might program and set your temperature.
The sensors.
Just the sensor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to be even more involved in making the technology as discreet as possible, not a feature.
Yeah.
And that is even feeding into the way we think about illuminating the space too, because that's still a piece of technology. We've always had a strong preference for hard wiring in table and floor lamps, because everyone, has or likes floor lamps, but to walk into a room and have to turn lights on to then turn on the floor lamp and then go back and maybe you'll switch off the room lights, but you probably won't, always made me think that those floor lamps are just never going to be really used, and it's a much nicer way of illuminating.
Right.
So we've been allowing for them to be hardwired in. So when you walk into the room, you can just switch the lamps on and dim them. And now in a lot of the key rooms, we're looking at other ways of creating even more general but highly dimmed light, just to create these other kind of sensations of just enough light, almost like candlelight in a space, which could then be punctured by task light.
So, I mean, Lutron had sponsored my podcast previously earlier in the year, and I've traveled with them and seen their lighting systems. There's a system they have that's called the Ketra system. Are you familiar with it?
No, but I think I might know what it might be.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that based on what you're saying, the Ketra system is like, it's a solution. I can tell you more about it afterwards, but it is exceptional. You can dim to essentially point, and I feel like Lutron will get mad at me, but if I get this wrong, but it's like 0.1%, so that there is, and they're without any flicker, and 16 million hues of color among many other things. But nonetheless, to your point, there are options within lighting, and the lighting makes the biggest impact, right? It either enhances or completely crushes the space.
Well, like we talk about natural light a lot, but for a lot of people, they might only be at home during the day a couple of times a week, but they're experiencing their homes, all through the winter, and then during the evenings with artificial light.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure they're not just turning every light on?
Yeah.
So it's about motion sensors and really being not mean with the light, but strategic. And the lighting, the daytime illumination with the sunlight is one thing, and how we design to illuminate the space at night is a completely other thing. We are not trying to recreate the same effect. Different tasks, it's different attitude and mood.
Yep.
It's a complete different mentality, and sometimes we can be even more kind of artistic with it, I suppose. And I guess we can be much more deliberate with private homes where we know where the furniture will be and we can have those conversations. But when we are doing things speculatively, we don't know necessarily how. We have a very good idea about how a space should be used, but it's not necessarily how it will be used. So we might have to be a little bit more generous there. But it's always on our mind. Yeah, and even in those projects, we'll still put in the provisions for hardwired lamps because it's just something we believe in.
Do you have an ideal project in mind that you have not yet had that you're waiting for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to do a place of worship. That's top of our list. Yeah. Whether it's a church, a synagogue, or a mosque, I would just love to do a beautiful place of worship, house of worship would be incredible, because it's a different typology, but you can really start to tie into the symbolism, how the space works at different times of the day or night when different festivals or ceremonies might be taking place.
Yeah.
We've designed Judaica Jewish items for Passover and for Jewish New Year. Yeah. So I'm really interested in how you can infuse the symbolism and the meaning being very pared back and in a contemporary way. So that's the place of worship is really like the biggest expression of that opportunity. So yeah, that would be something.
What no one currently is seeing, because this is not a visual form of media, is Robert's smile as he's talking about the concept of being able to potentially one day win a project that would be a place of worship. And so if you're out there and you're debating whether or not you are going to hire someone locally or abroad for your place of worship and design, perhaps you email Robert and engage in a conversation with him about that. Who knows? Maybe this hits the right person.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll pray on it. How about that?
Oh, there you go. Robert, what do you like to do outside of all of this? What do you like to do for yourself? And we've spoken about travel. Are there other things you like to do for yourself to be able to take your mind off it and decompress?
I love to travel, but when I've got a spare time, my girlfriend and I we'll jump in the car and we'll drive somewhere around outside of Melbourne. There's so many beautiful places that we can go on a small hike or go and get some lunch or some wine tasting somewhere, or a weekend away. It's great to get either into nature or to visit a small town and see the history. It's just good to get on the road and drive. Yeah, I just like that.
Yeah,
a nice long drive. It's nice. Yeah, and get some music going. Maybe some Jamiroquai.
Oh, some Jamiroquai.
There's definitely usually some Jamiroquai. Who am I kidding?
I mean, there's a side of me that was about to start saying, all we're really doing is traveling. Now moving.
You can open this with that track.
What's that?
You can open the interview with that track.
You know what? Actually, one of the most exciting things that happened when we started this whole podcast was creating theme music and drawing on inspiration from a few different bands. To have a friend of mine that creates music create the theme song for the podcast. Robert, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking time in your day for doing this. I've so enjoyed it, from talking about what it was like as a child. And I was supposed to reference something, and it's funny, this entire time I've been thinking. I said to you, "Oh yeah, I'm going to reference that later in the podcast." Do you remember what that was? No, I didn't. No. We were talking about you sitting around the table with your family. There was something that we discussed earlier. And I know that I'll go back and listen to this recording and say, that's what it was. I have to throw that back in somehow. I don't remember exactly what it was.
I don't remember.
I feel like it was something about, I don't know if it was about the poster, putting the poster on the wall. Oh, I'll think about this afterwards and I'll regret not being able to reference.
Was it like painting the walls or moving the furniture around?
No, I don't know. It was something along those lines, something from around that time when we were discussing. It's okay. I'll let go of it. Look,
all right.
I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last bunch of months and the calls that we've had, but really and truly appreciate your ability to be able to express the experiences that you've had over your life and how they've kind of culminated into what has been a pretty outstanding professional career so far. I really look forward to showcasing your work. If you're listening to and you've reached this point of the discussion between Robert and I, please go to our Instagram page. You'll see his work featured there. Go to Robert's Instagram page, give it a follow. It's worth seeing. His work is exceptional. I've shared his work with a ton of architects here in Toronto. It's beautiful, and he's, as you've heard, a really, really nice and humble man. So the last plug I'm going to do again is to make sure that if you are going to be designing a place of worship, that you reach out to Robert. Robert, thank you so much, man. Truly.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Truly.
I'll see you later. Thank you.
Thanks.